Welcome to The Quiet Truth, where lay Catholics plan to revive the Lord's Day. I'm Tom Borak with episode 29, The Third Commandment and We of Little Faith. This is the third and final episode about the ongoing erasure of the Third Commandment's no work rule. Let's begin by considering the greatest problem facing the Catholic Church in the United States and how each of us can help solve it. During the past 60 years, each succeeding generation born to devout Catholics has contained a smaller number of devout Catholics and lots of atheists, agnostics, Marxists, and lukewarm Catholics. This is happening now rather than hundreds of years ago because we are now in the habit of compromising doctrine and condoning sin. And to the extent that any generation does that, the next generation will do even more of it. I've spoken with perhaps a dozen or so devout couples for whom the loss of faith among their children or grandchildren is the greatest tragedy of their lives. I've tried to comfort them, but I have to admit that they are right. They have reason to grieve. The souls of the ones they love are wandering away from God, and some will be eternally lost. One way we contribute to this ongoing tragedy is by compromising with the no-work rule of the Third Commandment and condoning sin against it. In our last two episodes, we've learned, 1, that the Third Commandment always has and always will unambiguously prohibit unnecessary work on the Lord's Day. 2, that arguments against this truth are foolish rationalizations for sin. And 3, that at this point, most Catholics are just as likely to work or shop on Sunday as anyone else. Consider an adolescent who learns what the commandment says and also learns either A, that her elders regularly shop or sell or otherwise work on Sunday, or B, that the St. Vincent de Paul Society hires people to sell furniture and clothes on Sunday and justifies its actions by saying that the modern world requires that we discard less important principles of the Catholic faith. She will conclude that Catholics in good standing ignore commandment number 3, and this knowledge will make it much easier for her, A, to reject particular doctrines, B, to condone her own sins and those of others, and even C, to reject all of Christianity as the work of hypocrites. Now, consider all the children, adolescents, and young adults who find themselves in the same situation, many of whom will drift away from God to a greater extent than their parents did. Once I saw this pattern, I had to face my obligation to honor the no-work rule, not just for my own sake, but for the sake of those I love and those they will love. I decided to follow and share these simple instructions. Step 1. Stop shopping on Sundays. Plan to shop on another day or days. Figure out in advance what you will need on Sunday, make a list, and buy everything ahead of time. When you fail to buy something you wanted for Sunday or Monday morning, try to do without. If necessary, eat your pasta without cheese, or even without tomato sauce. Butter and garlic are delicious. If your last light bulb burns out, use a flashlight for a while. And if you wanted new clothes for Monday, spruce up your old ones and wear them with pride. Of course, shopping online on Sunday also counts as shopping on Sunday. And, of course, you may shop for emergency medicine or hire someone to help with plumbing, heating, or cooling emergencies. Step 2. When you have a choice of stores, choose those that close on Sunday. Step 3. When you have a choice of jobs, choose a Christian-friendly one. That is, a job that does not require unnecessary Sunday work. Step 4. When choosing a career, choose a Christian-friendly one. Now, I understand that choosing a career is often, maybe usually, a painful and intimidating experience. It was for me. So I understand that people want to reduce the pressure by keeping all of their options open. The truth, however, is that there are a tremendous number and variety of Christian-friendly jobs out there, and as we stop doing business on Sundays, more such jobs will open up. It's also true that perhaps the most important criteria when career hunting is whether that career will help or hurt your family's chances of salvation. Try to make the right choice from the get-go. Step 5. If you are stuck with an employer who will not accommodate your Christianity, the best option is to immediately and absolutely refuse the Sunday work, regardless of the consequences. In this way, you can fully protect yourself from sin and provide the best possible example for family, friends, and coworkers. Unfortunately, some of us, like me, are neither faithful enough nor courageous enough to deliberately choose a long period of unemployment or underemployment. So, people like me are limited to the second best option, which will not necessarily protect us from sin, but which will demonstrate to family, friends, and others that we take the Third Commandment very seriously. Thereby, we can at least avoid hypocritical compromise of doctrine and condemnation of sin. This second best option is to make reasonable, persistent, and never-ending efforts to get unstuck and reveal those efforts to anyone who might be scandalized by our Sunday work. These efforts should include seeking comparable Christian-friendly work, seeking a new Christian-friendly career or business, or starting your own, considering the feasibility of moving to a place with more Christian-friendly work, seeking the assistance of other devout Catholics in finding appropriate work, and considering the possible benefits of requesting a religious accommodation from your employer, with or without the assistance of a union representative or Christian attorney. But what if you're still stuck after a year or 2 years or 5 years or 25 years? Keep trying. Never, ever give up. If you do give up, you run the risk of teaching by your actions that you have compromised with the plain meaning of God's commandment and that you condone its violation. If you never give up, you demonstrate your commitment to moving the Catholic community in the right direction. So, if you're stuck for a long time, never stop looking for other jobs, careers, and businesses. Try getting more education, seeking promotions, or otherwise enhancing your skills so that you will be more attractive to a Christian-friendly employer. And never let a single month go by without spending time on this project. Step 6. Teach your children, grandchildren, and others in your field of influence how to follow steps 1 through 5. By following these 6 steps, you can bring yourself and maybe the rest of your family into compliance with the Third Commandment. Sometime soon, maybe most or all of your descendants will be able to refrain from working and dedicate their Sundays to our Lord. We can hope that by living as God commanded, they will bring themselves closer to salvation and raise children who will be as devout or more devout than their parents. Following these steps without assistance is well within your power. It will, however, be easier with the active support of groups of Catholics and of Catholic institutions. Fortunately, devout individuals can influence groups and institutions. As Blessed Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen famously said, quote, "Who is going to save our church? Not our bishops, not our priests and religious. It is up to you, the people. You have the minds, the eyes, and the ears to save the church. Your mission is to see that your priests act like priests, your bishops act like bishops, and your religious act like religious." Unquote. So even if you are an individual lay Catholic with no authority outside your own family, you can still ask for help from priests, bishops, and Catholic institutions. If enough people ask for help, they can bring about positive changes, perhaps including some of the following. 1. Regular preaching and teaching about the need to follow the Third Commandment. Of course, in order for this teaching to make sense, it will have to acknowledge 60 years of failure to effectively teach this doctrine, and to acknowledge the failure of the Catholic community to follow it. Number 2, the assembling of information so that each Catholic family need not conduct its own employment-related research from scratch. For example, every parish and diocese should maintain and update lists of stores and online businesses that close on Sundays, Christian-friendly summer jobs for students, Christian-friendly employers and careers that are not Christian-friendly, and employers that require Sunday work but that honor requests for religious accommodations. Every parish or diocese should try to develop annual reports of the progress, or lack of progress, being made toward freeing Catholics from the economic pressure to perform unnecessary work on Sundays. And number 3, Christian-friendly career counseling for those entering the workforce and for those stuck in Sunday work jobs. But what, if anything, are devout Catholics obliged to do about the Sunday sales in Vincentian thrift stores in St. Louis? Let's begin by specifying the sinful behaviors at issue and evaluating their consequences. In general, the Society's leaders sin by encouraging others to sin, to discard Catholic doctrines, and to lose faith in God and in His Church. More specifically, the Society's leaders deliberately, A, encourage their employees to sin by paying them money to engage in non-emergency selling on Sunday. B, encourage their customers to sin by inviting them to purchase low-cost, non-emergency items on Sunday. C, encourage Catholics who are aware of the Society's Sunday sales to imitate the behavior of this revered Catholic institution by compromising with Catholic doctrines they don't like and by condoning sins they do like. And D, encourage Christians and others familiar with the Third Commandment to disrespect the Catholic Church on the grounds that the Church appears to have abandoned a basic tenet of Christian morality. The Society's leaders are personally responsible for any sin, doctrinal compromise, or disrespect for the Church that results from their behavior. They are speeding up the diminishing, that is, the shrinking and weakening, of the community of faithful Catholics in the St. Louis area. Are we obliged to take action to stop or reduce the consequences of this ongoing bad example? The answer depends upon our relationship with the society. If we are members of the society's governing body, certainly we are obliged to act, and our best possible action would be to immediately discontinue Sunday sales and publicize that we are doing so in order to comply with God's Third Commandment and the teachings of the Catholic Church. In this way, we could A, stop paying people to sin, B, stop tempting people to sin, C, teach respect for all of God's commandments, and D, enhance the reputation of the Church. In other words, we could end this cluster of sins and the effect of those sins entirely. Is there a second best option? Yes, but it is much inferior to the first. Some years ago, the Catholic community was regularly giving enough money to the society so that every year it could provide about the same amount of assistance to the poor and grow its savings at the same time. But as the Catholic community diminished, its donations diminished as well. Rather than reduce its assistance in proportion to the reduction in donations, the society chose to deficit spend, using up a portion of its savings every year until, predictably, the savings were gone, but the expectations of the poor and of those who directly serve the poor were as high as ever. At that point, admitting the extent of the problem and reducing assistance would have been an embarrassment for the managers and a difficult adjustment for those in need and for those who serve them. So a group of board members decided that the solution to this problem was Sunday sales. They felt at the end, some combination of serving the poor and limiting management's embarrassment justified the means, sin against the Third Commandment. They were wrong, but I expect that the mistake was honest and that they meant well. Given their mistaken assumptions, they could have chosen the second best option, which would have been to use the Sunday sales to keep the level of assistance up temporarily while doing everything possible to minimize their sin and its adverse consequences. Instead, they chose to set the Sunday sales practice in stone and to maximize the sin and its negative effects. They could have generated Sunday sales revenue without paying people to sin. They could have and should have volunteered to staff the stores on Sunday themselves, and if necessary, invited like-minded Vincentians to join them. The selling would remain sinful, but only because it would still encourage customers to sin by making purchases. Second, they could have acknowledged the Third Commandment and the teaching of the Church. They could have said, "We acknowledge that we are bound by God's Third Commandment and by the teachings of the Catholic Church. God's Third Commandment and the teachings of the Catholic Church direct us to avoid selling non-emergency items on Sunday. With heavy hearts and in fear of the consequences of sin, we have decided to open our stores on Sunday in order to avoid a sudden drastic decrease in the amount of assistance we can provide for the poor. The Archdiocese of St. Louis has not approved of our decision, and we will do everything we can to find alternative revenue sources and to end Sunday sales at the earliest possible date." Instead, they simply instituted Sunday sales without apology and allowed at least one of their executives to claim, one, that because we live in modern times, we should be willing to disregard Catholic doctrines, such as the non-work provision of the Third Commandment, because they are not, quote, core, unquote, doctrines. Number two, that non-emergency Sunday sales can be justified because they are more convenient for some low-income shoppers. And number three, that Catholic clergy find the Sunday sales acceptable. So, they violated God's commandment in the way most likely to maximize sin, undercut Catholic teaching, and cause disrespect for the Church. This was neither their first nor their second best option. It was and is inexcusable. So, if you are a member of the Society's governing board, you are obliged to choose either the best or the second best option forthwith. If you are a Vincentian who is not a member of the Society's governing board, you are obliged to request in the strongest possible terms, at least annually, that Sunday sales be discontinued or conducted in the least sinful way possible. You must also make it clear to every Catholic who knows you are a Vincentian that you object to Sunday sales. If you cannot bring yourself to do both of those things, you should resign, rather than giving the appearance of supporting an enormous public sin and its horrible consequences. If you are a Catholic, you must never, by your speech, your actions, or your silence, lead anyone to believe that you approve of the Society Sunday sales or believe that the Catholic Church approves of them. If you hold a leadership position in your parish or have influence with your pastor or another leader, you must demand that every announcement in the bulletin or from the pulpit pertaining to the society include a disclaimer indicating that the parish does not support the society's decision to open its doors on Sunday in violation of God's third commandment. If you hold a leadership or other influential position in the archdiocese, your obligation is equally clear. Nonetheless, I will try to send you an occasional reminder. Thank you for your kind attention to this presentation. Please like and subscribe. Feel free to respond with constructive criticism. I understand that pain is good for me. And finally, please let me know if you are one of those rare people who would like to be part of an organized effort to revive respect for the Third Commandment. Thank you again for your kind attention.